Well, I'm joined here in the studio by TRT World producer Mouhssine Ennaimi. He's the director of the off-the-grid documentary, Syria's Slaughterhouses. Mouhssine, what a name, and I guess it's not an easy topic to cover. What are viewers going to feel when they watch your film?
Well, I guess when they watch it, they will get a face on a system. I mean that the Syrian prison has been existing for a while now, including during Hafez al-Assad, Bashar al-Assad's father, a few decades ago. There have been a lot of reports from human organizations, human rights organizations. There have been a lot of data who's been, said, who's been, dispatched. However, it's a secret system. Everyone knows about it, but no one can see it. So the idea of having these characters telling the experience from inside, not only as a prisoner, but also as a guard, like Hamza in the documentary, is to put a face on a torture system, on a web of, I would say, a killing machine that is done by the states, for the states.
So for those who have doubts that there's systemic and systematic torture taking place, maybe they'll say there's some torture, sure, but that it's not as widespread as others might have them believe. For those who have doubts, after making this film, what would you say?
For those who have doubts, will first think that what happened to these people, it's not even inhuman, it's worse than that. We're talking about a system where not only people are tortured on a daily basis, we're not talking about a system where people are having an inhuman treatment. We're talking about a place, and I say place, but there are places where people endure everything that is impossible to live with. And I mean also that they are forced to commit crimes. Some detainees are asked by the guards, by the jailers, to kill one of their siblings in front of everybody. And they tell them, if you don't do it, we will kill you, and we will kill you in the worst manner. Some of them were also asked to rape children in the prison. So these kind of things are beyond,
right.
I mean, understanding. It's like very harsh. It was very hard for me to listen to all this testimony because I spoke to many people. And one of the reasons I really picked up Omar, the main character, is because he's 17 years old. 17 years old, you cannot blame a child or teenager for having some activism behind him. You cannot blame him for being a threat to the regime or to a state. If it's the case, then what kind of regime is this? Also, we tried, thanks to my colleague Alexandra Polia, who did the interview with the woman, to get the woman perspective, because it's completely different. In Syria, when you go to prison and you're a man, you come out, if you come out, as a hero. As a woman, it's the opposite. You come back as someone very minor in the society because of this rape issue. So the idea of having this woman speaking in the documentary and sharing with us the treatment they've been going through, and some of them had to undergo surgery after being beaten and raped so much during their detention in the Syria prisons. Was
this one of the hardest documentaries you've ever had to make?
It's not hard in terms of production, because I'm not in a hostile environment. I'm not in a complicated areas or places, but it's very hard psychologically because you hear all these things, and there are many, and you are absorbing all these words, and obviously you visualize it. So it's very hard, but at some point you cannot feel bad because you are just listening to what someone has been through. And that's of course, that's much more complicated for the people we've seen in documentary, Omar, Lola, Mira, all these people who've been detained. For them, for sure, they have lifetime consequences, psychological consequences, of course, but more importantly, really physical consequences.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks, Mouhssine. It's great to chat to you on set. once again, I'll be watching this weekend, and you can watch the full documentary this Sunday at 19:30 GMT. That's Off the Grid, Syria's Slaughterhouses, here on TRT World.
I start to believe that I'm going to die in the prison. In Saydnaya prison, there was people who killed other people because the other person had some water.
كتير اللي ماتوا كتير ما كنا نعد. قال لك السجن تبع صيدنايا كنا نشوف كتير عالم ميتين.
عم تتعذبي بالنهار وبالليل اغتصاب.
Off the Grid, Syria's Slaughterhouses on TRT World.
Let's broaden out this discussion and go to our panel. With me here in the studio now is Yahya Al Aridi. He's a spokesman for the Opposition Syrian Negotiations Commission. And in London, we have Ammar Waqqaf. He's the founder and director of Gnosos, a think tank focused on the Middle East and Syria. Ammar, let me begin with you. Never mind barrel bombs, never mind chemical weapons, never mind any of that. Why is the Assad regime continuing to slaughter, to torture, and systematically abuse prisoners? Those prisons are a hellhole. You'd agree with that, wouldn't you?
Well, it's very easy from the safety of Britain or Turkey to say that this is unacceptable and what have you. Probably people in Syria who have different priorities might actually want to give a mandate to President Assad to do whatever it takes, use whatever arsenal he has.
That's an interesting line, right? So before you continue, people in Syria want to give a mandate to Assad to allow prisoners to rape other prisoners, to kill other prisoners, to be tortured themselves.
Well, first of all,
to do whatever it takes.
Amran, we don't know Amran whether these things happened. We've heard claims, but we're yet to corroborate them with evidence. But the point I was trying to make is that it is easy for you and me living outside Syria and the safety of our houses to say that this is inhumane and not correct. But
so why do we talk about any country anywhere? Why do we talk about what's happening to the Rohingya in Myanmar? Why do we talk about what's happening in Sudan? If we're all sitting in air-conditioned studios, then we can't talk about anything. Let me ask you again.
No, hold on.
Is it justified? Is it justified? Okay, I'll tell you who's saying there's torture, right? There's killing and torture. Yeah. The Red Cross, Amnesty International. We have our own producers speaking to survivors of Saydnaya prison and others. Are they all making it up, or might there be something to this?
If you want to tell me that the Syrian government is not doing a Guantanamo but actually doing an Abu Ghraib, I would need evidence to corroborate the claims. It's not, you need to show me the Lindy England photo. You need to show me solid evidence before I say, well, this is systematic. The Syrian government, probably some people on the ground, some commanders in prisons, investigators, they are under pressure to produce results. They need to protect people from the next suicide bomber and what have you, and they use torture. I can understand that. I don't like it. I condemn it, but I can understand it. Again, people inside Syria give mandate to the government to protect them, use whatever arsenal they have to protect them. But if you're going to step up and say this is systematic, this is a killing machine, this is what have you, then show me the evidence apart from somebody telling a story.
Okay, so Amnesty International, they say Saydnaya prison is where the Syrian state quietly slaughters its own people, and they published a report about Saydnaya where they said as many as 13,000 of Assad's opponents were secretly hanged during the first 5 years of the civil war. They go on, they talk about rape, they talk about Adra, where the majority of females were raped and so forth. These people come out, they tell their story. One of the women told her story to Anadolu Agency, Ahi, imprisoned for 6 months. She said, quote, "They raped teenage girls without showing mercy. We could do nothing. They tortured me and my elder sister in various ways." So, Ammar, you're very willing to tell me that the Syrian people are giving a mandate to the government to do these unspeakable things, even if you accept that some of it is happening. But what about the Syrian people that this is happening to? Do you not care about them?
Well, of course we do, but then you need to understand that the problem in Syria is between two Syrian people. It's not between Syrian people and government or dictatorship. Certain Syrian people have gone the Islamic way. They want to establish whatever, Allahu Akbar, sovereignty on the ground, liberate Andalusia, whatever it is, and others do not agree. And then there is an issue here between two groups.
Okay, but hold on. You want proof of torture, but you're not willing to provide any proof that these people who have been tortured are the type of fanatics that you mentioned.
If you say that the Syrian, if you say, well, first of all, Amran, you're not even letting me complete one sentence. Now, we're not here to play judge and jury, are we? the best you can get out of me here is to let people think more and then know more. If you're going to tell me that the Syrian government used sarin gas or chlorine gas in Douma, then you're going to have to show me an evidence.
Hold on, I didn't. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about something that's very well documented about the prison system.
It's the
this
same
is something
thing.
that happened before the revolution even started. This is something that's been happening.
Yes, but it happens
for decades.
everywhere. It happens everywhere.
Okay, so
and
it makes it okay.
The region is stained, you know.
Okay, so it makes it okay.
Probably Syria now, there is a bit of urgency, Amran. So
okay, a bit of urgency.
Let's calm down a little bit. Let's calm down a little bit.
Yahya Al
and think.
Aridi.
Is there
Yahya Al
evidence
Aridi,
to corroborate the claims?
You would be on the other side of the fence here, I'd imagine. Tell me if anything that Ammar said makes any sense to you.
Well, it's not a debate between me and Ammar at all. However, two of the words that he used really surprised me and make me stunned. I understand, and the Syrian people gave mandate. This is really surprising. I, as a Syrian, as a university professor, as somebody who was with the regime for some time, when they decided to do what they have been doing, an example of that is what is happening in jails. I quit. I just you see me where I am.
Was it clear to you that it was happening when you were connected to the regime?
It was happening at certain points, of course, but it intensified during those 7 years. Now, what is happening in Syria actually is unprecedented, not in its brutality, not in what is happening in jails, not in the use of chemical weapons, not in the use of destruction, not in displacing half of the country, not in destroying half of the country. But, and if it were Abu Ghraib or whatever, or Guantanamo, I would accept that. I wouldn't accept that, but it can be understood because it is happening between an American and somebody who is not an American. Our case, unprecedented in the sense that it is happening by a government which holds the same identity, Syrian identity, and those who are being tortured in an unprecedented way in history are Syrians. This is what is really shocking, what is surprising, and it cannot be understood, it cannot be accepted, and they never get a mandate. Just imagine a Syrian home, al-Mukhabarat knocking at their door. They are scared to death from that particular moment, let alone what is happening in jails. And all these things have been documented. Now, those 55,000 pictures taken by Caesar and presented in the US Congress, did they come from Mars?
Okay, so let me ask Ammar. Ammar, I'm sure you came across the Caesar pictures. They were horrendous to watch. People with their eyes gouged out, horrendous things that happened to them. There was a display in New York about that. Wasn't that an example of evidence that some unspeakable things have been happening in Syria's prisons? Why don't you want justice for your fellow Syrians who are suffering torture?
Well, what if those people were actually Syrian soldiers captured by Daesh, tortured to death, or malnutrition, or whatever? The facilities that were used to show the pictures are all over the place. The same architecture for the Syrian army all over Syria. How do we know this is a Syrian army facility, or rather something that was occupied by Daesh or Jabhat al-Nusra? Again, evidence. We've seen part of it, we can hear claims. Let's go back to the Amnesty International report, and thanks for letting me speak a little bit more this time. Let's go back to Amnesty International report. For example, they say that one of the prisoners is claiming that he heard people underneath him, so the floor was trembling when people were wiggling as they were hanged. Now, this is a claim. Now, how do you corroborate that with evidence? It's just a claim. 13,000 people, as far as I can remember.
But what's interesting is that you're very keen to just dismiss all of it and present alternate theories, which you tend to believe. So Caesar you can dismiss, and then you go, what if? Where's your evidence for the what if then?
Well, the whole point for bringing me to your program is to present a counter-argument. My idea of participating in this program and any other program is to let people think and not take things at face value.
Ammar, this is not theater. Nobody's just taking sides for the sake of. Why isn't it plausible for you to say, I support Bashar al-Assad, I want Assad to stay, I want Assad to be the president of Syria, but given that there is overwhelming evidence that systematic and systemic torture is taking place in Syria's prisons. You know what? This is hard to defend. I wish it would stop. I want justice for innocent people who are tortured. Why is it so hard to say that?
Well, on a personal level, yes, I support. I give mandate to President Bashar al-Assad to protect my property in Damascus, to protect my family in Damascus, and my friends and everybody from Islamic
Even if he has
lunatics.
people's eyes gouged out and prisoners killing each other and raping each other to protect your property and your family.
War, you see. Things happen in war, unfortunately. But let me tell you another story. I met people who came out of prison. They were imprisoned during this era of the Syrian revolution, whatever you want to call it, and they came out of prison without being subject to any torture. And I have a distant relative who died in prison, or at least reportedly died in prison. We don't have a certificate or death certificate or a body or whatever. And those people who came out, they say we were not tortured. It wasn't obviously pleasant. They lost like 30 kilograms in 3 months or whatever. And it was a lot of pressure, psychological pressure. And why don't these people get interviewed by your reporter or Amnesty International? Why does it have to be, again, if there are people who are not tortured, then who are the people who are tortured?
Okay, if 8 out of 10 are tortured, why would we focus on the 2 that were not and who lost 30 kilograms in 3 months, as you mentioned?
How did you get that proportion? How do you say 2 out of 10? How do you know that? Why not 9 out of 10 not tortured? Why not?
I'm sorry.
Amnesty
in
International.
Cambodia, if they killed half the population, should we focus on the fact that the other half were not killed? I mean, I don't understand some of these games that we're playing.
This is not Cambodia.
I want to bring in Yahya Al Aridi. Yahya. When we talk about justice, there's a lot of talk. I've had you on this program before. You talk about justice, accountability. You want the international community to do something. Carla Del Ponte, when she was on that UN investigative panel into human rights, these were her words. I give up. The states in the UN Security Council don't want justice. And this was connected to torture. This was connected to what's happening in the jails. So when she's saying that, ultimately, look, don't you give up as well? The pressure for Assad to step down is less. There'll be a political settlement. And this is just how your prisons are in Syria. Take it or leave it.
Well, whoever wants to defend what has happened in Syria by the regime during the past 7 years is defending the undefendable. And this world used to shake up and hell turns loose when a chicken complains somewhere in the world. Now, Syrians have been suffering for all this time. It is said, and it is documented also, that almost 700,000 people visited jail. And till today, at least 300,000 are still in jail. Just their remaining in jail all this time, just because they said no, is enough in itself to be considered a war crime. And that lady resigned because it saw the world turning a blind eye to all those crimes. Syrians have suffered, as I said, in an unprecedented way in world history. Hitler did all these things, the Holocaust, and Hitler was being a criminal against other people, not Germans, all right? Now, we have a case of a regime expected...
He did kill German Jews, I mean...
Of course, yes, this is the exception on racial purposes,
right,
but not on national purposes. Now, on national grounds. Now, we have a situation in Syria. People just go to jail. And the whole family is blackmailed and taken hostage. And all the friends. It's not a matter of the person being tortured in jail. All the family is crippled. This is what's happening. This is a case of immorality, and this is the case of just underthrowing people to silence them in whichever way. So the use of severe punishment and cruelty is intended at its own purpose, with nobody paying attention. Chemical weapons were used, and the arsenal was taken away.
Right.
So the tool was taken, but the perpetrator is left to do other things, to continue the crimes. This is what's happening in Syria, and that's why the world is not paying attention. We understand that this regime, which is supposed to be mandated to protect Syrians, and we hoped that this would be the job of the regime. Unfortunately, it was supported by real powerful countries to remain in power. This is the point that we really suffered a great deal from, and it is continuing. There should come a time when they say there is no way that it can be rehabilitated. It is irresponsible, and it cannot be trusted to take care of anything.
Okay. Ammar Waqqaf, do you still support Bashar al-Assad?
Well, yeah, let me tell you a little story, and thanks for allowing me to speak again. My neighborhood in Syria, where my house is there, it's called Barzeh. It's like 500 meters from the front line. 500 meters away from my house is a guy called Abu Nimr who sent his 10-year-old with suicide belt to go and blow herself, called Fatima, his daughter, to go and blow herself up in a police station. Now, if people, I don't live there, I haven't lived there for 15 years, but if people in my building say, please, Bashar al-Assad, prevent this person from occupying our building and taking our women as hostage and putting them in cages, as they did when they did in Adra al-Ummaliya, the labor city of Adra, north of Damascus, you know, parade them in cages and so on and so forth. Please don't let that happen to us. Would they, do you think, be supporting Bashar al-Assad, or would they be thinking of how humane or inhumane his
Ammar,
tools
Middle Eastern
are?
people, Ammar, Middle Eastern people have blown themselves up in London, right, as suicide bombers. It's happened on 7/7, it's happened at other times. Would you support people such as yourself being rounded up in London, being sent to prison and tortured because they're suicide bombers coming from among your community? Would you support that? Would you accept it as these are tough times?
No, that's a very good question, because
would you support being tortured because Arabs and Muslims have blown themselves up in London, so you know what, tough life?
Well, that's a bit subjective, don't you think? But let me tell you that the people who plow into pedestrians in London and blow themselves up.
Would you support yourself as an Arab man in London being picked up and tortured because others with a similar profile have blown themselves up in London before?
Again, that's very subjective. What I was trying to tell you is that
would you want to plead your case and say I'm innocent?
The people who blow themselves up are not the Assad supporters, Amran. People who blow themselves up in London are not the Assad supporters. It's the people who want him out. So being objective, I would probably round people who are connected to those and see some evidence and probably get some confessions and so on and so forth.
I've got to wrap.
And then deal about it. Not call any Arab or any Asian community or any Muslim, bring him into jail.
Ammar, I've got to wrap. Yahya Al Aridi, I thank you both for joining us here on the Newsmakers.